Unpopular opinion, staying silent was the most powerful thing I ever did. My son ran that company for 6 years. He gave interviews, he fired people, he took the credit, and every single morning I sat in the back row and let him. Nobody in that building knew what was in that document. Nobody except me. Before we go any further, subscribe to Revenge Handler. This channel exists for every father and grandfather who gave their best years to this family and got betrayal in return. If that hits close to home, you are exactly where you need to be. Hit subscribe right now, because what I'm about to tell you, you need to hear it all the way through. My name is Walter Greer. I am 67 years old. I'm a father. I built everything I have from nothing. This is my story. Get comfortable, because the people in this story had every single chance to do the right thing. They chose wrong every time. Drop a comment below. Make sure you are subscribed. You are gonna love it here. And if you think you already know where this is going, you don't. Not even close. The document was a routine filing, a legal ownership summary, the kind that sits in binders nobody reads, except someone pulled the wrong binder. I watched my son pick it up from across the glass wall. I watched his hands go still. He read it once, then he read it again. He did not move for 4 minutes. I know because I counted. Let me take you back to where this started. I was 24 years old when I started that company. No investors, no loans. A rented desk and a phone that rang twice a day if I was lucky. My son was 3 years old. He used to sleep in the back office in a laundry basket. I am not ashamed of that. That is where we came from. By the time he was 12, I had 14 employees. By the time he was 18, I had 40. He never asked where the money came from. Kids don't. I sent him to a good school. He did well. He came back sharp and confident and hungry. And I made a decision that I have thought about every day since. I restructured the company ownership through a holding entity. I hired a firm. I made sure my name was not hidden, but not visible unless you knew exactly where to look. Then I hired my son, not as my son, as a candidate. He interviewed with the board. He presented a 5-year growth plan. The board, my board, hired him on merit. He never asked who owned the parent company. Most people don't ask that question. I watched him walk into that building on his first day as CEO, and I felt something I still cannot name. If you were just joining, you need to go back and watch from the start, because what I'm about to tell you only makes sense if you know what came before. 6 years. That is how long my son ran that company before the document landed on his desk. 6 years of board meetings I sat in quietly. 6 years of strategy calls where I asked questions, not as the owner, but as a senior advisor. That is the title I gave myself. Senior advisor. My own company. People on that staff would offer me coffee and ask if I needed the Wi-Fi password. I always said yes. Now let me tell you what I watched during those 6 years. My son was good. I need to say that plainly because what comes later is harder to understand if you do not know that first. He was organized. He was decisive. He built the revenue up 31% in year 2. I sat in the back of that boardroom and felt something that surprised me. Pride. Real, quiet, almost painful pride. But pride is not the whole story. If this is hitting close to home, give this video a like right now. You know exactly what I mean. In year 3, something shifted. Small things first, the kind of things you explain away because you want to. He started dismissing certain staff members in meetings, long-serving people, people I had trusted for 15, 20 years. He called it modernizing. He said the company needed to move faster. I said nothing. I told myself, he is the CEO, let him lead. That is what the whole arrangement was for. Then came the vendor contracts. 2 of our long-term suppliers, people who had worked with us since I ran the company from a rented desk, were replaced. New vendors, better margins on paper. I did the math later. The margins were better, but the new vendors had a silent partner. It took me 3 weeks to find it. I am not a man who forgets faces. The silent partner was my son's college roommate. I sat with that information for a long time. I did not confront him. I did not pull the contracts. I opened a notebook. I wrote it down. I turned the page. Because a man who moves too fast loses his evidence, and I was not finished watching. The false hope came in October of that 4th year. He came to my home for dinner. He was relaxed. He talked about the company like he loved it. He asked me, genuinely asked me, what I thought he should do differently. I almost told him everything that night. I had the words ready. But then he said something that changed the direction of that entire evening. He said, "You know what I appreciate most, Dad? That you trusted me to do this without hovering. Most fathers would have been in the way." I picked up my fork. I cut my food. I said, "You're right, most would have." And I turned the page again. Still with me? Good. Because this is where everything changes. Year 5 ended quietly. The notebook had 11 pages. The vendor situation had not corrected itself. 3 more long-serving staff members were gone, and my son had begun talking to outside investors, without telling the board, without telling me. I found out the way I find out most things. I stayed late. I listened. I said very little. The investor conversations were not illegal. I want to be precise about that. A CEO exploring growth capital is not a crime. But these particular conversations included a restructuring proposal, a proposal that would have diluted the holding company's ownership position by 40%. My holding company. My 40 years. He did not know that, but he also never asked. And a man preparing to restructure a company's ownership without understanding who owns it is either careless or reckless. I needed to know which one. So I made a decision, not out of anger. I was long past anger by then. Out of clarity. I called my attorney. I called my accountant. I called the one board member who had known me since year 1, a woman named Patricia, who had watched my son grow up at company Christmas parties. I told all 3 of them the same thing. Do nothing, say nothing. I am almost ready. We are almost at the end. Subscribe if you have not yet, because what happens next is something I have never told anyone. While I was building that case, my son kept moving. He hired a PR firm. He gave an interview to a regional business publication. I read it on a Tuesday morning with my coffee. The headline called him a self-made leader. The article talked about how he had taken a mid-sized company and transformed it through vision and discipline. There was a photograph of him standing in the lobby, my lobby, the one I paid for in 1987 with a contract I signed on a folding table because I did not yet have a desk. I put the article down. I finished my coffee. I picked up my notebook. Page 12. The moment I knew everything, truly everything, came on a Wednesday in March. My son called an emergency board meeting. The investor restructuring proposal was on the table. Formal documents, signatures requested. He stood at the head of that table and presented it with confidence. 40% dilution, new capital, new partners, new direction. The board looked at the documents. Then 3 of them looked at me, just for a moment, the way people look when they are waiting for the person who actually knows what to do. My son did not notice. He was still talking. I let him finish. Every word. I did not interrupt. I did not shift in my seat. When he was done, the room went quiet. And then I did something I had not done in 6 years in that building. I stood up. I had waited 6 years for that moment, and I had made sure, when it finally came, that I was the only one in that room who was not surprised. You stayed. Good. Because this, right here, is why patience is a weapon. I stood up slowly, the way old men stand, deliberate, without apology. I buttoned my jacket, and I walked to the head of the table. My son looked at me the way you look at someone who has just walked into the wrong room. Polite confusion, mild irritation. He said, "Dad, I appreciate you being here, but we're in the middle of I put a folder on the table. One folder. Patricia slid it toward him without being asked. She had been waiting 6 years to do that. Inside that folder were 3 things: the original incorporation documents from 1984, the holding company structure, every layer, annotated clearly, and a single cover page with my name at the top and 4 words beneath it. I am the owner. The room did not erupt. That is what people expect: noise, drama, a scene. There was none of that. There was only silence. The specific kind of silence that happens when a large number of people suddenly understand something at the same time. My son read the cover page. Then he opened the incorporation documents. His hands were not steady. He looked up at me once, then he looked back down. He did not speak for a long time. When he finally found words, they were small ones. He said, "How long?" Not a question, a statement said like a question. I said, "Since before your first day." He said, "The board knew?" I looked at Patricia. She looked at him. She said, "Some of us." He sat down. The investor proposal stayed on the table, unsigned. It has never been signed. Now let me tell you what happened after, because the karma in this story is not what most people expect. I did not fire my son. I did not humiliate him publicly. I did not pull his title or his salary or his parking space. The vendor contracts with his college roommate's silent partnership were restructured properly, transparently, with full board oversight. The 3 long-serving staff members who had been pushed out, 2 of them came back. The 3rd had already built something of her own and did not need to. I was proud of her for that. My son and I did not speak for 11 weeks. I counted those too. On a Sunday in June, he came to my house. He did not call ahead. He knocked. I opened the door, and he was standing there the way he used to stand as a boy when he had done something he could not undo and did not know how to begin. He said, "I need to understand why." I let him in. We sat at the same table where he had told me most fathers would have been in the way, and I told him everything. Not as an accusation, as a father. I told him about the laundry basket in the back office. I told him about the folding table in the lobby and the contracts I signed when I had nothing. I told him I had wanted to see who he was when he thought no one was watching, and I told him, "You were good, and then you got comfortable, and comfortable is where good men lose themselves." He did not argue. That told me more than 6 years of watching ever had. He is still the CEO. He knows who owns the company now. He has not restructured anything without a full conversation first. The notebook is in my desk drawer. I have not opened it in 8 months. I did not build that company to own my son. I built it to show him what a man looks like when he refuses to quit. It just took him 6 years and 1 folder to finally see the whole picture. If this story moved you, subscribe to Revenge Handler, share this with someone who needs to hear it, and drop a comment below, because your story matters too. I will see you in the next one.